Hey everybody, welcome to the Ongaku Concept podcast. Here with me today I have Insane in the Rain Music, also Carlos. I do not know how to pronounce your last name.
The last name is pronounced Eiene, as in Eenie, Meenie, Miny, Moe. Also, it's my birthday
Eiene,
today.
okay.
Happy birthday to me.
Yo, happy birthday. You're 19 this year, aren't you?
Yes, that is correct.
I always think you're older. I saw Garrett tweeted at you earlier today. He said the same thing. I always think you're older.
How old are you?
How old am I?
Yeah, I mean, if you're comfortable saying that on the internet.
I think I have before. I'm 23.
Oh, okay. So you're basically in that ballpark.
Yeah. In the college ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of which, you're going to Berkeley now, aren't you?
Yeah,
It's your second year? You're going into your second year?
Yes, I finished semesters 1 and 2, and I head back in a couple days for semester number 3.
Awesome. How is it so far?
It's very, very awesome. It's so much easier to practice when everybody else around you is also practicing.
Yeah, I guess that'd be a good motivator.
Yeah, and classes there, because it's a music school, just aren't really that difficult, I found. Because I think Berkeley, of the popular music schools on the East Coast, I think Berkeley does a very good job at recognizing that music students especially need to have lives outside of school, with playing gigs, and in my case making YouTube videos. So their classes are not super like nailing you to the ground with work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice balance.
Yeah, I hear Charles Ritz is headed your way.
Yeah, he went
soon.
He went to the Berkeley 5-week camp, and I think I'm not sure if he auditioned for a scholarship and got one. I'm not exactly sure. But
I believe he did.
Okay, so he looks like he might be coming to Berkeley next year, which would be
That's
very,
exciting.
very fun.
And Can of Nothing, I believe you're familiar with him. He's headed there as well.
Oh, this year, or in the same time as Charles?
I think if it's not this year, it's when Charles is coming.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'll keep an eye out for a Can with
You guys are all
Nothing
going to be
inside of
like
it.
banding together. It's like, but I mean, like Berkeley's obviously one of the most renowned music schools in the country. If not the world.
Definitely.
Especially for contemporary music, because there are so few schools out there that are geared towards contemporary music.
Mm-hmm. Most of it is either very specifically classical, very specifically jazz, but Berkeley has a very diverse mix of pop and other things.
Mm-hmm. So what do you this is not how I intended to start it, but I'll get to my questions eventually.
Sure.
But this is really, I'm speaking as somebody who has, first of all, never been to college. Second of all, never been to, I should have said those in the reverse order. First of all, never been to music school. Second of all, never been to college to begin with. So it's interesting so what are you majoring in, if you've decided that yet?
So the major I'm currently pursuing is called Contemporary Writing and Production, which is essentially a hybrid of a composition degree and a music production degree.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, and there's the major is basically split into two, the composition side and the production side. It's aimed at people who produce music at home studios, so basically most YouTube people. So it fits very well. And there's some classes on obviously basics of using a DAW, writing arrangements for different types of instruments, like vocal writing is a class I'm taking. Then there's advanced studio ensemble writing, things like that. I'm also considering pursuing a minor in video game music scoring, which I'm sure you need no explanation for what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, Berkeley.
That's cool.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if they used to have a major in video game scoring or if they're thinking of including one. But it's a fairly sizable community there. And it's one of I don't know how many other music schools offer degrees in video game scoring, or at least recognize video game music. So I'm very happy to be one of the few places where there is one.
I know that Full Sail University.
Well, that's Full Sail. Full Sail is everything. Everything music and nothing else.
Yeah. But certainly that's a rare degree to be found. And what do you do you have any specific plans of like what you're pursuing with that degree? Like, do you want to compose game music or do kind of like a mix of things?
I would like to. I mean, it's obviously going to be a mix of things down the road, especially if you're living as a musician. I would like to compose for games someday. I don't have too many opportunities to do that right now, nor have I really explored into it. But it seems like something I would enjoy. Of course, continuing to make YouTube videos. Still figuring out exactly how I want to expand beyond that, because when I'm an old fart, I don't know. I don't think I'm still going to be making YouTube videos.
If YouTube's still around.
Yeah, there will be some point where things will change, and maybe something will come my way, and then I'll jump on it, or I'm not sure. I haven't figured it out quite yet.
There's this composer named Senri Oe. I believe I'm getting that name correct. And he wrote a song called Rain, which I believe it was written in the late 80s, but it was covered recently, and so it's kind of been made popular again by I forget his name, but he covered it for the movie Kotonoha no Niwa, or Garden of Words. Anyway, but he was a J-pop composer in the 80s, and then years later he went to, it might have been Berkeley, but it was some music school in the States, and he studied jazz there, and because he was looking for something new to pursue, after he was kind of like tired of what he was doing in his music career. He was looking for something new to pursue, so he went and studied jazz, and he's been a jazz musician since then.
Huh. That's an interesting way to get into jazz, of just not having anything else to do.
Yeah, it really is. I forget who said it. I think it might have been Vinnie Moore. He's a guitarist. There was an interview, and I believe it was him who said that he sees that the older you get as a musician, regardless of whatever genre you started with, you end up kind of making your way towards jazz.
That's funny.
Which I think makes sense, because jazz offers like a lot of challenges that a lot of other music doesn't.
Yeah, I agree.
If not from a technical perspective, at least from a theoretical one.
Mm-hmm. And there's a whole notion that of jazz harmony, and like when you start talking about seventh chords and stuff, and oh boy, you're getting into jazz territory. Mm-hmm. I think that's a bit of a misdemeanor, because you can really apply that to any genre out there.
Yeah.
I prefer the term contemporary harmony, because harmony has come a long way since Bach, those times, and I think the general population is more used to the sound of dissonance. I guess you could argue about that, but dissonant music is becoming more popular. So there's more room to expand away from the traditional triadic structure of music into stuff that is mostly known as jazz harmony, but could easily fit into any genre. Yeah,
for sure. As a lot of Japanese music shows.
Yes.
Example.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I don't listen to a whole lot of Japanese music, but from the stuff that I have checked out, it is always harmonically interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Because jazz really had a huge influence on, in particular, Eurobeat. Eurobeat and Italo disco were massive influences on Japanese
Italo
music.
disco, I've never heard of that before.
I believe it's I don't know anything about my genres, but I believe it's related to Eurobeat. Genres have never made sense to me.
They're such strange labels.
They are, like, it's tough. So speaking of which, this is a good time to segue into some of my questions for you. Why the Insaneintherain moniker? Where did that come from?
The name? That's a good question. I get that asked quite a bit, because it's not like the typical, it's like my name with an EB at the end, or just my first name with a family and 7X. So back in the day, I started my channel around. Well, okay, this goes back even further than the existence of my channel. So I had a channel before Insaneintherain Music that was just called Insaneintherain. Which was made in my middle school years. And in my middle school years, I was quite interested in competitive Pokemon battling, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
I still know a little bit about it to this day, but I don't participate in it as much as I used to. And so during that time period, the first Pokemon that I think I've really EV trained well and like knew how to raise with IVs and stuff was an Omastar. And Omastar had access to the ability Swift Swim, which raises its speed in the rain. It also had access to a move called Shell Smash, which doubles its offensive stats at the cost of decreasing its defensive stats. So basically, the strategy behind that would be you would get Omastar in the rain, and then use Shell Smash, and then obliterate everything else. Hence the name. It went insane in the rain, And I think that I don't know if I like consciously made that connection when I was in middle school creating my channel name. It also just kind of sounded cool. Like,
oh yeah.
It rolls off the tongue and it sort of rhymes. Someday I think there's a song called Insane in the Membrane or something like that. That when you type Insane into YouTube has always been above my name. Someday I'm going to surpass that in YouTube autocomplete. That's my goal.
Do like an arrangement of it. And
Insane in the Membrane covered by Insane in the Rain.
So speaking of that, and your YouTube channel is pretty old now, isn't it? Didn't you start it like a good...
It's just about to be 5 years old.
Yeah,
so come September 8th, I'll be starting my 6th year of making videos.
And you've been doing weekly videos for how long of that?
Weekly videos started sometime, I think it was my 3rd year. So my 3rd year through my 5th year, pretty much entirely I was doing weekly videos. I've scaled back to once every other week currently, just because I felt that I was pushing myself a little bit too hard and balancing other things in life, and it was getting difficult.
Yeah, and I remember the video that you made about that, which I'm going to get into later. I think that's really interesting. But first, I'll ask, what is your musical background? Because first of all, you play so many instruments. It's not like like every time I see one of your videos, you picked up a new instrument, and I'm like, wow, you're basically becoming PPF at this point.
Well, I don't know if I don't think I'll ever reach the same level of musical perfection or name perfection as PPF was. So my first ever instrument was classical piano. It happened, I got into music when I think it was one of my relatives had an upright piano and they needed a place to put it, and my family volunteered. So there was an upright piano in my house, and I learned how to read sheet music, and I taught myself that stuff just from reading the various method books that were in the chair or the bench of the piano. We got it. Then 5th grade band happened, and I picked up the clarinet, and I already ahead of the curve because I knew how to read sheet music, which was quite nice. Picked up saxophone shortly after that because clarinet is usually an introductory instrument to saxophone.
Yeah, so I've heard.
At early education levels.
I'm not sure. They have very similar timbres to begin with.
They have. I think the most important thing is they play, the method of playing is very similar. They have the same mouthpiece and reed setup and the same, cover more buttons equals lower, basically. That's the thing they're trying to ingrain you with. And I would say, honestly, that saxophone is not that much more difficult than clarinet, but maybe it's more expensive or something, and that's why they don't use it as much in schools. So I ended up playing alto saxophone, then switched to baritone saxophone in middle school, then switched to tenor saxophone in high school, which is what I've been playing for, all of the rest ever since then. I took classical piano lessons for 2.5 years in middle school and took jazz saxophone lessons 2 years in high school, and now I go to music school.
So first of all, a lot of your, the vast majority of your covers are very jazz based in various jazz genres.
And I would say subgenres because jazz is a genre. I'll refrain from calling the genre.
I have no idea what genres are.
Just they're stupid.
There's you're familiar with Hideki Naganuma, aren't you?
Maybe that name doesn't sound familiar off the top of my head.
He did the soundtracks to Jet Set Radio. Jet Set Radio 2, Sonic Rush. He made a tweet one day. It was something to the effect of genres. Musicians don't think about genres. Genres are for consumers and labels.
I totally agree.
Yeah, that was. I hadn't heard it phrased that way before, but I completely agree with it. It's
it's just general in human nature. We understand things by boxing people into certain like little areas of criteria, like, you know, you're white, you're black, things like that. I don't think there's I know I don't want to talk about that too much, but like before like genre racism though, like I don't know. I
see what you're saying.
Let's not go there.
Yeah. So like, right. As I was saying, so how do you approach a cover when you have a song to cover? Like, how do you go about approaching it? Like, how do you decide, okay, like, where do you start with it? What's your process and how do you develop it? And what kind of goal do you have in mind when working with it?
Sure.
And you can pick some like specific cover if you want to, if it's difficult to give like a general answer.
Yeah. So I was just, as most things in life, starting is always the hardest part, I think. Like getting a task, starting is super hard. The same with coming up with a video. Like once I've got an arrangement idea, I can just truck through it and finish it pretty easily. But again, coming up with arrangement ideas are hard. And coming up with good arrangement ideas is also is even harder.
Yeah.
So the process that I use now is I tend to, of course, arrange songs that I have heard before because they're already in my brain and I don't have to go through the extra process of learning them in order to rewrite them in my head.
Because it's one thing to learn something by ear, but it's entirely another to learn something by ear that you have not memorized to begin with.
Yes, of course. Yeah, it's important to... I think there's also something behind having some familiarity with the source material and understanding the context in which the song appears. Because sometimes... The way I personally like to do things is I try to keep the spirit of the original or like the intent that the original was meant for while just presenting it in my own way. I think that's a fair balance of, of keeping things from the original and changing them. So what I've been doing is I force myself to come up with 10 arrangement ideas on a piece of paper. And then once I get to 10, or I give myself like a time period to come up with like 10, maybe 12 or something like that. And then I whittle them down to like the top 2. Like I ask myself, do I really want to do this? Do I really think this is going to sound good? Do I really feel that there's some urge to try this out? I've done that for my past few videos and I've ended up coming with some arrangements that I'm pretty happy with. And those arrangement ideas, I think, usually come from me blending the source song with other songs that I have heard before. And, the creativity saying that there's nothing new under the sun. I will readily admit that I steal so many things from other musicians that I love. I mean, I'm sure you've done that too.
Oh, absolutely. We all do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, it seems like disintegrous maybe, but it's just how music works and how art has evolved over the years is people stealing things from other people and putting them in, reinterpreting them and doing really cool things with them. Yeah,
I wouldn't say because on the surface it does seem disintegrous, but I don't think that it is in spirit. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, like, you cannot do anything that hasn't, like, anything that you are capable of doing that might look original it's like how you can't and you can't create like energy or matter. I'm forgetting my science classes.
Yeah,
one of those two.
The law of conservation of matter.
Yeah,
that's what it is. It's like
so whatever is created is made out of other things that already exist, and I think that extends beyond the physical realm into more abstract ideas, and so concepts and writing and music and all that kind of stuff. You can't create something that hasn't been in some form created before, because you can argue like even like the earliest musicians might have been mimicking sounds in nature or other or things like that, or it doesn't even have to be sounds, but translations of other experiences and sensations into a musical form.
So that's really interesting to think about.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot lately.
Like where music started and how and how it's evolved.
Less about its origins and more about how, because I've been kind of at a I wouldn't say at a wall, but I found that there are certain things that I can't find the answers to by looking through music theory. So I've been looking towards other artistic studies, like writing or art or things like that, to see if I can find answers. And I found some really interesting stuff across other forms of art that I can use to relate back to music. And it's kind of opened my eyes to the idea that, like, hey, maybe there's some more primal, for lack of a better word, things in us that is expressed differently throughout these different forms of art, but it's really the same thing. So for example, my most recent video, as of right now, is titled "Music is Basically Food," and it's kind of just a discussion about the idea that the metaphors that we use to describe music, that we share with other sensations, there might be more to it than just, coincidence. Like, I don't think it's any coincidence that we correlate, the words warm, thick, big, stuff like that with like low frequencies, as we do with warm colors like red and orange, as we do with warm temperatures and large objects and things like that. I don't think
you're
it's
suggesting there's like a deeper underlying thread that connects all those different
correct
sensory observations. So that's really interesting.
Yeah,
I can definitely notice that like with like taste too and sight. Like
yeah,
there's
exactly.
a lot of things that are like, because I think music is so abstract and that we have to come up with these terms to describe them to perhaps people who aren't familiar with music theory, or even those who are, like for timbre qualities. That it's interesting that there's a general consensus on these terms.
Yeah, and that's the interesting part, because it would be one thing if we all had like completely different perceptions of it, but the fact
that would make sense for each individual person. Yeah,
but the fact that we can kind of generally, not perfectly, but generally get what we mean when we say stuff like that, is very indicative of something like that. And there's a couple. I'll send them to you after this. I'll put them in the description of this video as well. But there's a couple, after I made that video discussing that idea, I got a response from a couple people on Reddit who suggested a book. It's called Metaphors We Live By. I don't remember the name of the authors. And then this one music theory professor who has been studying this idea for a long time. And I have yet to look through those, but it's exciting to think that there's, people out there who've noticed this as well, and who have put like a lot of study into it.
It's really interesting. Interesting.
What were we saying? How do you approach arrangement? So you were saying how
borrowing elements from other songs.
There we go.
Yeah, there's a YouTube channel called Jazz and Memes out there.
Oh my goodness.
It's managed by a fellow member of the community. I won't say who, just for the sake of privacy. But there's a video, if you look up, it's called Insane in the Fake. And what it does is it juxtaposes a lot of my arrangements with the songs that I stole from. And some of them like, they're not, I didn't tell this person what all my inspirations were. Some are mentioned in video descriptions, or like others I guess are his hypotheses. But it's really funny to see them all like right next to each other, because it's like, yeah, I did take from that and it sounds good, so of course I did.
Yeah, exactly. So when you have like an idea, kind of a general idea in your mind about how you want to approach it, how do you, like, when you actually get down to work, like, where do you start? Do you start with, the chords, or do you start with like maybe a bass transcription or the drums or something like that?
I almost always do like if I don't know the song super well beforehand, I always start with a transcription of getting it down as accurately as I can, because, there are some songs that I have like mislearned over the years.
Yeah.
Like Chemical Plant Zone, like the rhythms in that are so subtle, and I've gotten them wrong so many times that, and I still do to this day. But I usually do a transcription. I start at the piano and play through a few like ideas I have for just general grooves or progressions. Sometimes I write those down like little sticky notes, and then I take everything into MuseScore and I write like a full score for, not necessarily a full score, but like enough to where I know what I want to do with it. It's not like I'll write a voicing for every single piano chord, just chord symbols and slashes are usually good enough, depending on the music. I envy people who can just like not have to write anything down and just do it all in their head. Because I just think my stuff is like so complicated and there's like so much going on that I need at least something that I can look at.
Yeah, it's hard to remember.
Get it down.
That brings up the idea of improvisation, because I know improv is like a tenet of jazz as a whole. And so that's something that's really practiced heavily amongst jazz musicians. And improvisation, it's certainly been, I would say, like the most difficult skill for me to master. And I think a lot of other people have trouble with it. And so what would you say, if you have any advice to people who are learning to improvise, what sort of advice or maybe guidelines could you give them?
Well, improvisation is a lot like speech, I think, because it's basically learning to like speak through your instrument in the most natural way possible. So I think of how humans learn to talk. As babies, we learn to talk from listening to our parents speak, listening to what we heard on the television. So listening to other improvisers is incredibly important. Because it gives you an idea of the vocabulary that is used in the genre. There are different styles of improvisation in like improvised metal solos, which there probably aren't a lot of, but there are probably some, versus, typical jazz 32-bar songs. So listening to them and transcribing them is so important. Transcription is one of the, not just like transcribing chords and transcribing melodies, but transcribing individual players' solos, internalizing them, learning to play them by memory. That is so important to your internal development of musical vocabulary.
Yeah, I think I think it makes a lot of sense to relate music back to speech. I heard one time, I forget who it was. It might have been Larry Carlton. There was some interview that I was reading with a jazz musician, and they said that they compared the sound of jazz as a whole, and like the sorts of melodies that are played, to everyday life, basically.
Yeah, that's an interesting way.
So somebody I forget who it was, but they mentioned jazz being like the sound of walking around New York City. And
of course it's New York City. It always has
of course
to be
it's New York City. And just conversing with people.
Yeah. There's a lot of chatter and response in jazz music. Some stuff like classical music, I guess you could give that to, or like concertos especially, more akin to like someone giving a speech,
Yeah.
And in like not getting interrupted or having a very set script of how they're talking. It's interesting, like how instrumental music does some of the similar things that vocal music does, but just with, instruments.
Yeah. I think it's related to, I don't think it's a coincidence that the form of singing that, I can't think of any singers off the top of my head who do this. Tony Bennett, there's one. It's almost like it's kind of halfway between singing and talking.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, or halfway between singing and talking about.
And it really does emphasize the conversational nature of jazz, at least that form of jazz.
Yeah, conversation is such an important element of it. It's one of the things that you miss out, unfortunately, on, or that you lose when you play all the parts yourself, is because you can't interact with all the other ones in real time. That's why I usually I try to record piano after I record saxophone to at least simulate some of that. And I often go back after I've programmed MIDI drums. I go back and edit them after everything is in, to simulate a real drummer reacting to things. It's not quite perfect, but just to preserve a little bit of that.
Yeah, it's a good idea though. There's a video. It's some video of this guy like advertising some storage, like some nowhere. You know what I'm talking about. He's advertising like this storage facility. It's not a facility. It's just his backyard or something like that. And it's one of the funniest videos I've ever seen. Somebody took like, there's some program that will like harmonize, audio.
Yeah. Okay. I know. We're like the guy. He like puts chords behind, like the human speech. Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I've seen that. I think that's like Publio Delgado on YouTube. That's the channel name, I think.
I'll link it in the description. But it's just like playing jazz chords and stuff to this guy's speech. And like, first of all, it's hilarious. But secondly, it actually sounds like a halfway decent jazz song.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, and I think to myself, well, like, if anything else, like that really does show the conversational nature of jazz. Like it really does sound like the way jazz, goes. So I that's interesting.
I've wanted to do an arrangement like that for a while now. I just can't find the right like video game excerpt to base my my arrangement on.
My first thought was the Titus laugh.
Needs to be a little longer.
Yeah,
it needs to be like a like maybe like one of the things from like Brawl, or like the snake, the thing where Snake talks and he talks about whatever enemy you have your face, or like some cutscene or something.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask about so we talked about like arrangement and like the mechanical or technical process of that,
yeah.
but you mentioned the idea of keeping the cover close to the, like, preserving the spirit of the original piece of music. And I think I definitely think that's really important with game music in particular, because game music is so integrated into the story in which it takes place.
Yeah.
So how do you define like what that is and try to, so is it like a, preserving the melodies, or are there other aspects that you tie back to the context that you think, okay, well, I can't get rid of this without completely removing its integrity?
Yeah, it really depends on the specific song. And I try to imagine it from like the mind of a non-musician who's playing through a game, and try to identify what I think they would latch onto. And melody is, of course, super important. I try not to change the melody too much.
Yeah.
Because I think, I make videos for people to listen to, and it's videos of songs that they should already be familiar with. And if you change the melody, you lose so much of what they're already familiar with.
Yeah, exactly.
And, there's you can change a couple things here and there, but as long as like you retain the shape and general, you can change the key and they probably won't notice some, but retain that as much as possible. There are usually, some rhythmic things, or some, like important parts that aren't just background things. Anything that I think would stand out to the listener. I think the spirit of the song, as you said, video game music is super tied to the context in which it appears. And that's why I think it is very helpful, or if not necessary, to like experience that song in the game,
Yeah.
In order to like preserve the original emotions. Because it's one thing to like hear the music like on YouTube as soon as the games come out in like an OST rip or something, but it's another to experience it and know what is like ideally going through the mind of the player or the mind of the characters in that specific situation, and trying and not going away from that too much in the arrangement that you write.
There's so I got a Nintendo Switch recently, and it's really fun. I love it. And I got Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for it. And first of all, the Mario Kart 8 soundtrack is absolutely phenomenal. one of
love
the
it
best
too.
game soundtracks I've heard in years. And I sure wish there was a definitive list of the arrangers for all that stuff, because I really want to know. But I was so each course has, you know, either an original piece of music for a course that is new, or, you know, a remix of a piece of music from a course that's shown up before, or something like that. And there are certain ones that, like, you can tie where the song, considering that the gameplay is you're just racing around a track, the music is just made to loop, right? It took me a long time to say that. Music's made to loop. And so it's kind of so it's not tied to specific actions. It's not dynamic, put it that way.
Yeah.
It's kind of capturing the general tone of the location. But there are a few specific courses where it's not a looping track. It's actually one long track with 3 different segments. I don't know if you've played Mario Kart 8.
Yes, but, I have. I know which ones you're talking about.
So Big Blue in particular is honestly.
Oh yeah, they do a great job of that.
That's honestly like one of the most exceptional like experiences I've had in a game in a long time. Because like I was almost crying by the end of the course. Because I don't know why, but like, I mean, I do know why. It's because the entire experience was integrated in a very focused manner where everything about it was supporting the main idea of the experience itself. And in particular was the music, because throughout the course, there are these 2, particularly the second half of the course, second third of the course, there are these 2 paths which kind of wind and twist and turn around each other. And that's the segment of the race where the solos kick in. And so you have the guitar and the saxophone that are trading off solos. And so it feels like a dance between the 2 of those that mimics what's going on screen as these 2 paths are going.
Yeah, in a way, it's like cutscene music, but it's interesting because I don't know if Mario Kart has ever done tracks that are just like start to finish like that before.
I don't think it has.
I don't think so. Because a couple other ones in that game, there's like Mount Wario.
That's another one which
that's like the snowy one.
Yeah, and
every time I'm thinking of.
Every time I didn't even notice it, which, I mean, I guess this is the entire goal of it, but I didn't notice that it was dynamic until I played through it a couple times and noticed that it does change to this section once you reach this part. So like when you're going through the trees, when you're kind of threading through the trees, it plays like this violin solo throughout that section, which is
That's
while
so cool.
it's got like these little stabs, you know, do 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 do, you know, that stuff like that. And it's like it's unlike the music, and not to say that the music for the other tracks is any worse for this, but like unlike the music for most of the tracks, which is just kind of capturing the general feeling, the stuff made for the long courses mimics what's going on as you're racing.
Yeah.
To a finer level of detail than the other courses could. And so I think that's a big part of the reason why they stand out to me. So
I hadn't thought about that.
So I did want to ask you, I have one more question for you, which might be difficult to answer, but
try me.
So you made a video when you discussed how you were going to change your cover schedule, and you were also going to kind of change the certain types of covers that you were doing. You put out a video talking about how you felt that your channel was beginning to go in a direction that you didn't want it to. Mm-hmm. And you wanted to be more mindful about the sorts of videos that you did, and in particular, you brought up the idea of musical integrity in the kind of work that you did. And after I watched that video, I also watched a stream that you tweeted about Jackson.
Yeah, Jackson's stream. That was some hard stuff right there.
It was. And so it got me thinking a lot about that idea. And like Jackson was saying, it's really tough to answer. But I wanted to see, explain for people listening who might not be aware of what was going on and how you've responded. Because it's been a few weeks since that happened. And so how you've responded since then and the idea of it in general. Yeah.
So essentially what was happening throughout, basically when I first started college is that I didn't have the same feeling of pride that I had after finishing covers that I would with most of the videos that I did at home, which I think can be attributed to, not having enough time to do them and just trying to get them done for the sake of getting them done and not really enjoying the process. And I think if you watch the videos, like you can tell I'm less, physically happy playing the parts for most of those videos in there. Yeah, I mean, it's not kind of sad to go back and watch them. The music is still pretty good, but it's not like amazing in my opinion. So that feeling had been growing on me for a while, and then I had done some arrangements in the beginning of 2017, like my Me channel thing. But that wasn't one I did for the views, that was just kind of a one that somebody suggested. I was like, oh, okay, this will probably be fun. And it now has 1 million views, which is crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, I never expected that for that particular song. Then a couple of others from Persona 5, which I haven't even played, but I thought would be good to cover just because it's new and people are talking about it. And it felt like selling out, honestly. And I had been thinking to myself that there's a lot more to this there's a lot more to making music than getting views and getting more subscribers. That's a YouTube thing. I don't have to do that, and in fact, it will happen naturally. I was just trying to speed it up. So then I released my version of Jump Up Superstar, which was the new song from Super Mario Odyssey, which I
can't get enough of.
Yeah, the original song is wonderful. So the version I released has a male vocalist in it, and the original song is written for female. And the male vocalist in this one was Jiggy11. He's normally a Twitch streamer, but he does some musical theater stuff on the side. And cool. I thought it would just be kind of fun to have him on. I didn't expect really anything serious out of it. I know he's not a professional singer, but it was to emulate the Sinatra style of jazz. And so I released that, and like that has been like my most like disliked video like ever.
Wow.
Because people were like, I don't like the male vocalist. The song is female vocalist. And that was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. And then I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to make high quality stuff again. Not that I actually really liked that cover personally, I thought it was pretty good, especially the big band stuff. The big band writing was like one of my best. But then I just realized that, that was also sort of a song that I kind of did because it was popular. And I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. In Jackson's video, or I guess the stream footage that he uploaded, he referred to like a struggle that all creatives go through when you start doing this thing for money, when it becomes your occupation, is you have to balance what other people are asking you to do and what you want to do yourself. Ideally, when those two things line up, wonderful things happen.
Yeah.
But sometimes, like, usually you have to strike a balance somewhere. Like, you have to do some stuff that you want to do and some stuff the audience wants to do, or in each individual creative will have a different spot on that spectrum. Basically what had been happening to me was I think I was shifting too far to the side of what other people wanted to do, and I was losing on the personal satisfaction side. So I decided to cut my upload schedule in half, basically just give myself a bit more time, shift things over to what I wanted to do a bit more. And I've been very happy with the music I've produced since then.
That's good.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I'll stay at once every 2 weeks forever. I might go back to weekly videos once, things in my life change. But I think it was something that needed to happen. And it was an issue that I wanted to bring up in the greater music community, on the video game music community on YouTube overall, is that, like, there were like at least six versions of Jump Up Superstar out there. And I don't know how many people actually did it because they liked the song or did it because, it was new and popular.
Yeah.
But I think people should really put a bigger emphasis on the stuff that they like rather than what everybody else likes. Because music is, at the end of the day, like if I were to die today, and look back on my channel, I would rather be proud of the stuff that I made rather than say, oh, I got this many subscribers.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
like, Jackson brought up some really interesting stuff in his stream, and he was saying, like, yeah, if you are an amateur and you just do it for fun, then of course, you want to focus entirely, on what it is that you enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, that is the actual book definition of amateur, is somebody who does something for the love of the pursuit itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so he brought up, okay, so when you become a professional and you start relying on doing that to make an income, or at least if you're headed in that direction, then that realistically, even though people, say, well, you should just do what makes you happy and stuff like that.
They say that, but that's not actually true. Like,
right.
The opinion of the commenters is often different than the opinion of the analytics.
Right. Because
the analytics don't lie.
At the end of the day, like, you have to be able to sustain yourself. So if you're going to be relying on it to make money, then whether that's your entire income or part of it or whatever, then you really do have to listen to what people want, and hopefully you can find a way to do that in a way that you enjoy. But he said something really interesting, which I may be phrasing this poorly, but it was a way I hadn't thought about it before, which was, if he said he was saying, like, he's like, I don't have a family right now, but let's say that I did, and they overheard me on a stream saying, well, I don't do this for the money. I just do it because I enjoy it or whatever. And what would they think? Because they're relying on him to make, that income to support them. And it's almost a selfish thing to say that, which is a really interesting take on it that I hadn't heard before.
Yeah, that was I remember listening to that as well, and it was very eye-opening, or put things into a greater perspective, and also made me glad that I'm not financially supporting anybody right now.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you might as a benefit of being the amateur or being the small YouTuber is that I guess they're sort of small YouTuber and amateur, generally similar things, because at that size, you're not really making enough money to live. But, it's the freedom to do what you want to do is so nice, and like, I wish I could just make a cover of anything that I wanted, pick some obscure song that I really liked, and then everybody would love it and watch it. But, that's just not how the thing works in real life. And at the end of the day, you gotta pay the bills,
Yeah.
So I think one thing that I liked what Jackson said is that the professional musician does things that they don't want to do.
Yeah.
And that's just like professional anything that they don't, not to say, like, how you said that the amateur does something out of the love for it, and that is not to say at all that the professional doesn't have just as much of a love for it as the amateur, but the professional is the one getting paid for doing it, and
so they have a certain obligation and responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah, like and that's one of the great things about people like in our position right now, who aren't relying, at least not fully, on the income that they may or may not make from doing this sort of thing, is that you have the freedom to experiment and find a way of going about it that is comfortable to you before you reach a point where you are reliant on it.
Yeah.
And I would say that
it's definitely
go ahead.
it's definitely a struggle to balance it. Like, no matter how much you've prepped for it, like, there's always going to be the draw of one side versus the draw of the other side, and it's up to you to make the best decision.
Like, one of maybe some advice, I guess, for people who are going through that or thinking about that would be to, you know, if you and this can apply to other fields as well, but let's just say with game covers, if you are in a position where you feel that the need to cover a song that you don't like, then you might think, okay, well, how do I approach this in a way that I might enjoy? So, for example,
you can also you know, I don't want to say too much, but there are ways to make things that you initially dislike eventually likable too. And the same goes for the other way. There are ways to make things that you like now eventually dislikable. So you have to be careful.
Yeah. Like so for example, there have been songs in the past that, you know, I felt was necessary to which, I mean, the idea that you talked about doing covers of certain songs because you felt, you know, the need to kind of rush the getting views and things like that. I've definitely experienced that before, and I've done a couple covers before for that reason. And certainly they're less satisfying than the other kinds of work that I would do. But the way I've approached it a couple of times in the past, which has been really helpful, is to try and go, okay, what can I do with this to make it really interesting? So, for example, I might take a song that I don't particularly like, but take it and go, what if I did this in the stupidest genre possible? So, like the genre that makes the absolute least sense for this song. And just for the novelty of that suddenly becomes entertaining, and it's a lot more fun to work with like that.
What if I did this song with a male vocalist instead of a female vocalist? Hey, there's an idea.
Exactly. So, anyway, we talked about a lot of stuff, but what is your? I brought the links up. Okay, so if you want to find Insane in the Rain music, you can find him on youtube.com/Insaneintherain music, twitter.com/insane. I can't read this.
Insane Rain music, because the person who's Insane in the Rain hasn't given it up yet.
Okay. And patreon.com/Insaneintherain music if you want to make his financial future a little better and allow him to cover more things that he enjoys covering.
Yep.
So I don't think I have anything else to say.
Do I? No. This was a very nice interview. Thank you very much. I openly will admit that I had some very bad interviews before, but I really like talking about higher level musical concepts like this, and not just not just music, but also artistic in general. And I really appreciate you asking me.
I'm a little surprised we never brought up 7 sharp 11 flat 9 chords.
Well, then half the people watching would be like, "Oh yeah, that, just turn it off." You know? Although I guess this is a music theory channel, you know. So
yeah,
maybe that's another day.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, I will talk to you some other time. Maybe I'll have you back sometime. We can actually talk about music theory. But,
music theory channel. We didn't actually talk about music theory this time, guys. Exactly. I bet you liked that.
All right. Later.
Yeah, later.